We saw them burn down a police precinct, and her immediate reaction afterwards was to promote a bail fund for the people that were arrested. How is this not support for people that are using violence?
Donald Trump is the only president in American history that has not conceded an election. He's the only president. He still says the election was rigged. Then we had something called January 6th. What was it about that day that made you say to yourself that that wasn't enough to have me not support him? That's the part that I'm confused by. That. Help me understand that.
January 6th was a riot that got out of control. I watched the opposite party, the Democrat Party, ignore or celebrate, including the VP, Kamala Harris, who then became the frontrunner as presidential candidate for the Democrats, promote a bail fund that encouraged, while the rest of us were locked down, primarily due to policies Democrats endorsed under the fear-mongering of COVID, they actually allowed Black Lives Matter with impunity to go out.
But hold on, Rob, that's not fair.
Sure.
I'm happy to talk to you about Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
Happy to talk to you about that. But the question wasn't about Black Lives Matter, and it wasn't about a bail fund, and it wasn't about Democrats. Does January 6th happen if Donald Trump doesn't lie about the 2020 election?
Yeah, I think that even if first off, you're poisoning the well by saying lying, right? He doesn't think that it was a lie. He doesn't think that it was a lie. And we may find out in the future that the evidence shows that there were things that occurred that were unusual. For example, did you know did you know that in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Superior Court, after the 2020 election, ruled that mail-in ballots were against the Pennsylvania Constitution?
Doesn't change the outcome of the 2020 election. In fact, there's no evidence that has been proven that anybody that's come forward could have changed the outcome of the election. Yes, I do believe Donald Trump knows he lost the election. I do believe he's lying. He's admitted that to certain people in conservative media and even people on the left like Bill Maher and others. But even if he did think he won, that would make him a delusional moron, because as I said, there's no evidence to prove that there was widespread voter fraud. So you're telling me that if Donald Trump had conceded like every other president has done and called Joe Biden and said, congratulations, you're telling me you still think there would have been an insurrection? And by the way, I don't care whether you label it a riot or an insurrection. That doesn't really matter to me. I don't care. Violent riot, insurrection, it doesn't matter to me. The people that were there because they believed the election was stolen and they tried to overthrow a free and fair election. You're saying that still happens, you believe?
I think there would have absolutely been a host of people that would have still been outraged and thought the election was stolen, even if Donald Trump had conceded. If Donald Trump affirmatively came out and said, trust me, this election was above the books, it was the most secure ever, as people on the Democratic Party tried to gaslight us into believing, then maybe that would have tamped it down. But what I'm saying is, let me finish the point real quick here. The truth is that we have a binary system. Would you agree with this? Yes, you could vote third party, but ultimately we're going to make the choice between a Republican or Democrat when it comes to president. You agree with that?
For the most part, yeah, of course. I mean, obviously independents can run, but yeah, I agree. Sure.
So if I look at January 6th and that riot that got out of control versus the Democrats that were supporting riots that occurred all over this country while
which Democrat supported violence?
Kamala Harris promoted a bail fund for people that burned down a police precinct.
So that's not promoting violence. There's a difference. What she did was she allocated funds to help people to defend themselves in a court of law. She didn't ask for them to get pardons like Donald Trump did on January 6th. She also didn't call people who committed violent acts on Black Lives Matter protests patriots and hostages. That's what the guy who you supported did. So there is a difference between allocating funds to raise money to help people defend themselves in a court of law or pardoning somebody and calling them patriots and hostages. The two do not align. And Kamala Harris has never said once that she supported violence. So that is blatantly not true, what you're saying. Can you name me another Democrat that has condoned violence?
Sure, I could get there, but I would like to stay on this point. So two things on this. One, if Donald Trump would have promoted a bail fund in the day immediately after January 6th, which you've said it was outrageous and proof that he supported an insurrection?
I would have absolutely been. By the way, there are certain crimes that you commit that I do not support a bail fund. And to my knowledge, Kamala Harris did not want people to get bail that beat police officers.
Show me that. Show me her saying that.
Well, tell me, name me one individual where Kamala Harris tried to get them bail who committed a violent act on a police officer, because you're the one trying to make that argument, not me. What I will tell you is that Donald Trump is the guy who not only, it wasn't even bail, he pardoned 700 violent criminals on January 6th, some of whom beat police officers. By the way, I think we both could agree, you're not a patriot if you beat a cop. He labeled all those people patriots and hostages. There is no comparison, make no mistake about it, with what Donald Trump did after January 6th and calling them hostages and patriots and pardoning people, some who were convicted of seditious conspiracy, Enrique Tarrio, one of them, and what Kamala Harris did. And she has never endorsed in any way, shape, or form violence. Donald Trump is the guy at his rallies who said, I'd like to beat the heck out of that guy. I'll pay your legal fund if you do it. You couldn't name me one statement that Joe Biden or Kamala Harris has ever made in their entire political career that rises to that level of incitement. If you can, please do so.
All right, one, I can, but I notice what happens is we keep interjecting and sort of adding to this. Let me finish my point that I was making here. The point is that we would clearly say that if Donald Trump had promoted this bail fund on January 7th, the day after January 6th, you would have said it was outrageous. You wouldn't have said, oh, no, he was just intending for the nonviolent people that maybe got caught up in the arrest swept there. He was just intending for them to use the bail fund. Similarly, with Kamala Harris, she didn't have to specifically say, oh, this is just for nonviolent people. We saw them burn down a police precinct, and her immediate reaction afterwards was to promote a bail fund for the people that were arrested. How is this not support for people that are using violence?
That's not true. That was not her immediate reaction. I don't know where you're getting that from. In fact, her immediate reaction was to say violence is not the answer. We want people to peacefully protest. That was
Trump
not her,
on January 6th.
That was not her immediate. I know, but you just said that was her immediate reaction, and that is false. That's just not true.
Show me. Did that tweet precede her promoting the bail fund?
The tweet that you are referring to when she talked about bail fund was not immediately after what took place.
It's like the day after, correct?
Protest. Well, you said immediately after. Immediately what she did. Well, you're laughing, but that's not true. Immediately after, she was calling out an end to violence, and violence should not be. And you're trying to make a comparison between events that took place during Black Lives Matter protest. I've been very clear on this. I don't condone any violence in any way, shape, or form. And I'm pretty confident Kamala Harris doesn't as well. There is a difference between giving someone the funds to be able to defend themselves in a court of law and calling somebody a patriot who beats cops and pardoning them. Do you not understand the difference there?
No, I think that is exactly wrong. I think not only did Kamala do that, but then she later went on to Stephen Colbert, someone's show, and said, we needed protests like this to continue. Now, if you combine these two things and you use an objective interpretation, it would mean that she's okay with the people that were being locked up and thinks that they were acceptable, that she's benefiting them. For example, did Kamala Harris promote a bail fund for people for January 6th that were arrested? Why not?
Why did she not come up with a bail fund for people on
Correct.
January 6th? Is that the question?
That is the question I'm asking you. Correct.
I have no idea. I don't know.
You acknowledge there were she just wanted. She's just magnanimous. She just wanted to help people with their legal defense, right? No, she specifically chose these people because she agreed in the message behind the protest.
She did not agree with violence. She never has said anything on
Trump.
that she agreed with violence. Okay, well, he called those people who beat cops hostages and patriots. So I would absolutely disagree with you.
You tell me what's more effective of a support? Someone saying, hey, I think Rob's a patriot, or someone saying, here's a bunch of money to defend yourself in court? I think the latter is more meaningful support of me.
Donald Trump pardoned all those, most of those January 6th insurrectionists. Did Kamala Harris get involved and pardon anybody? You think somebody that has access to money to defend themselves in a court of law is a bad thing? I would say in this country, we have that right. And if people want to raise money, and to answer your original question, I would have much rather had Donald Trump help raise money for January 6ers, insurrectionists, as I would call them. I would have much rather have preferred Donald Trump raise money for their defense fund. By the way, it wouldn't have helped, I don't think, because many of them were convicted in a court of law. But I would have been much more okay with that than Donald Trump calling them hostages and patriots and then pardoning them. Many of those people were sentenced to pretty long prison sentences. So I completely disagree with that. I don't think there's any correlation. Oh, yeah, by the way, there were hundreds of thousands of people that were there in D.C. Most of them weren't violent, but they were there because they believed the BS that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Okay, they were screaming, hang Mike Pence. Now, I don't condone any of the violence during those Black Lives Matter protests, but there were tens of millions of people that were peacefully protesting across the country. Why? Not because they thought an election was stolen because somebody said so with no evidence, but because they wanted equality, which I think is a good thing. Now, I don't condone any of the violence at the Black Lives Matter protest, but you have millions of people that are there because they want equality. And then you have a couple 100,000 people in D.C., I would call them idiots, who think the 2020 election was stolen, which it wasn't. And you can say over and over again, well, we might see some evidence down the road. We might see some evidence that the earth is flat too. But to this point, there has been zero evidence of widespread voter fraud that would show that the 2020 election was stolen, yet the president of the United States, and you seem to be okay with, keeps saying that it was rigged and it was stolen. How can you be okay with that?
So you said a lot. One, we're looking at a binary choice. I think that you're being disingenuous when you say that you wouldn't have been outraged if on January 7th he promoted a bail fund. It is clear. It's clear. Number two, when it came to the pardons, yes, there were many people that were treated unfairly. Wide sweeping as they were, maybe the pardons go a little too far, but let's not act like Kamala Harris was a part of an administration to abuse pardons. Not only did they pardon many people that were convicted killers, etc., but they actually pardoned people that were in Joe Biden's own family and Democratic politicians, etc., which were outrageous pardons on the end. Number three, the disproportionate in a binary choice, right? In a binary choice between Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, right? The amount of violence we saw from left wingers was extraordinarily more, including on May 30. And that's quantitatively.
According to our own statistics, that's not true, and you've been given that in other debates, and you've just washed it over, just like.
Show me the stats. From where? What group are you getting those stats from?
I will gladly email you those statistics. I don't have them right in front of me, but I've had these types of debates before, and according to our own FBI, they can tell you that there have been more. And even if that was true, let's just say hypothetically speaking, even if that was true, it doesn't condone what took place on January 6th, and it doesn't condone people who beat cops and Trump calling them hostages. And
did you vote for Kamala Harris, or did you vote for Joe Biden in 2020?
I did. Absolutely.
How can you defend voting for a candidacy that, one, promoted a bail fund for people that was using this violence, and second, when they attacked the White House?
Okay, let me answer that first.
Let me finish.
Okay, well, let me answer one at a time. Let me just answer. I know Andrew likes to do this, so
I mean, you've definitely talked in great chunks more than me here. But go ahead.
Well, true, because almost everything you've said isn't true. So
I disagree.
Okay, well, again, there's fact and then there's fiction. First of all, I don't see anything wrong with people having the funds, no matter who they are, to be able to defend themselves in a court of law. Then let a jury decide. It's people like you, when you don't like the outcome of a jury's decision, you say it's fake and it's rigged. Like the 34-count felonies, for example, or like a liable sexual abuser, for example. When they actually have their day in court and they have the funds to defend themselves, you guys don't like the outcome, so you call it rigged. I don't see anything wrong with people being able to have the funds to be able to legally defend themselves in a court of law, no matter who they are, because that's how.
I just want to be clear. If Trump comes out tomorrow and starts putting bail money out for people that are in the KKK, you'll say, I don't see anything wrong with that whatsoever.
Well, what did they do? What law did they break?
Let's say they lynched someone. They lynch someone and Trump says, here's bail money for them. You'd say, no problem.
Sure. Here's the way I would respond to that. Well, I would root for those people if there's overwhelming evidence that they were guilty. I hope they get the electric chair, and I hope they're found guilty. They still have the right, just like anybody else in this country, to have their day in court to defend themselves.
That's not the question.
Okay, no, that was the question.
No, the question was, would you say you're perfectly fine with Trump sending money himself for their bail fund, for their legal defense? You would be okay with that and say, hey, that's cool because I support everyone's right to a free trial, so I wouldn't impugn Trump for that?
I wouldn't say it's cool. What I would say is what I just said. Everybody has the right in the United States of America, unless you're a Trump supporter and you don't think people have the right to due process, which I would assume you're okay with that. Everybody in this country has the right to due process. They have the right to see their day in court. Whether I say, well, I probably wouldn't do that, or maybe it's a bad look, I'm saying they have the right. The president should not have the right, I don't like pardons in general, by the way. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, to lie about an election, to incite, and to call people, as you're the president of the United States, patriots, some of whom, Rob, beat police officers on January 6th. If Joe Biden or Kamala Harris
She did. She saw the violence that was occurring in a nightly day that was against lockdown orders and went on to a late night comedy show and said, these protests need to continue throughout and beyond the election. That's what she said.
She was not promoting violence. In fact, the thing that you're missing is she called out violence multiple times when she was on the campaign trail, when she was vice president, multiple times she called, and when she was a senator, called out the violence and said violence is never the answer. I'd love to find out how many times after January 6th, Donald Trump called out the violence. He did not. It took him 5 hours to tell those people to go home. He called them patriots, and then he called them patriots and hostages, even those who were in jail who committed
Okay, so the point
I'm sorry,
is,
who-
as you're sort of
Go ahead.
as you're sort of going off with all this stuff, I think that it's obvious. It's hard to get into your head like you try to do with Donald Trump and say you know when he's lying or not. I think it's obvious to anyone listening that you would be outraged, as would the average Democrat, if Trump started to promote bail funds the day after January 6th.